Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another exciting and rather warm edition of the Everyday Missionary Podcast. Yes, finally summer struck. It is the late middle of July. I'm in the second floor home office of my lair, if you will, and I am warm. I am so warm that maybe in this video you will see little driplets of perspiration beginning to form. That is not my glistening glow. No, that is just water pouring from my body because this is a very warm place. And today's podcast, it is going to heat up. By the time I'm done, I will have probably shed a solid pound and a half of water because this is starting a new segment for the podcast that I am calling my Rant-O-Thon. Yes, it's the Rant-O-Thon. This is a new additive that I'm throwing in every once in a while when I feel like there is a topic that I'm so passionate about, so certain of, so driven for, I want to rant about said topic. Now, when I say rant, I want to be clear right from the get-go that my heart in the rant is not shame. It's not to be a know-it-all. And certainly it's not to try to point the finger at others who don't agree with my rant and say, you're dumb, I'm smart, that's why I'm ranting because you're a fool. Like, that is not my MO in this whole thing at all. Rather, it's because there are times where I'm like, man, I'm so focused on something, so kind of positive in my own world about this that I'll probably get kind of excited and I'll probably say a bunch of stuff, and then some stuff will be like, oh, I wish I could take that out. But we don't edit any of the podcasts ever. FYI, if you've been listening for a long time, there has never been a single time that we have snipped any part of a podcast out. It is this start to finish, one take, that's it, you get it. And then if it's train wreck, we just kind of post that and then take the hits for it. So that's going to be that. And so today I might just get so excited that you even have to slow it down a little bit. Like, most people listen to podcasts at like 1.5 speed, maybe 2 speed. I know with me, some people say, dude, I can't even get 1 speed. You might slow this down to half speed every once in a while because I'm just snapping away with stuff. All right, so here's the thing. I'm going to start with the rant right now a little bit by talking about something that I myself am tremendously guilty of. And part of it's my makeup, part of it's my personality, part of it is the fact that I side a little bit on the introvert side, and that leads me down certain paths. But it's also something that I see heavily in not only evangelical Christianity, but uniquely in the side of the evangelical world that is closer to the one I inhabit. In other words, churches that have a high view of studying the Bible, a high view of theology, want a certain level of academic rigor behind it, a little bit more intellectual in that regard. And then in light of that, I think there are certain dispositions or values that form up in those groups or churches that I think are values that aren't bad, but they're maybe too hard in a direction, or it's too high in the value structure, and it sees these values as end-alls as opposed to these values should be tools to end-alls, if that kind of begins to set the table a little bit for us. So here's the thing I've come to realize over the course of time, and more, not only do I see it, but I'm a little kind of concerned by it. And it's this idea that we think that what's most important to do and what is most courageous to have are principles, ideas, information, theology, data, right? So we think, it's really critical that we have these principles stated, we have our principles memorized, we explore those principles in depth, that we look at how rich and amazing and lofty those principles are, and we get together in groups and we discuss those principles and we pry them apart, and we have words that are 5 syllables or more regarding these principles. Some of these principles are ethical principles, some of these principles are theological principles, some are philosophical principles, some are covenantal principles, whatever it might be, and we go, that's what's most important. It's accuracy, it's the purity of mind, it's the soundness of theology and truth, that is our highest value, right? That's what we tend to do. Now, with that, I want to be really clear of something I just said a couple of minutes ago, which is I believe all of those are incredibly critical tools. It's as important as having a hard hat, and it's as important as having, any kind of item that has safety and security and everything else behind your tool. If you're going to use a chainsaw, you want to make sure it's safe and operational. If you're going to be driving a dump truck, you want to make sure that all of the safety protocols are in place and it's a solid dump truck that isn't going to break down on you. So tools matter, and all those tools of study and interpretation and theological structure, all of that is incredibly helpful at the tool level. But here is the thing I am absolutely positive of. One day when we die, right? We are going to kick this bucket. We are going to stop breathing. We won't be able to fog a mirror. They're going to stick us in the ground, or they're going to scatter us in some field someplace. That is what's going to happen. But our real us is going to stand before Jesus one day. And when we do that, he's not going to sit us down at a table, give us a bubble sheet, and be like, all right, here is 100 theological questions. How well did you do in life when it came to the truth of what I revealed to you? And then we're going to have to fill out the bubble sheet. Like, that is not going to happen. In fact, I'm going to take it a step further. The Bible is oftentimes clear and then other times confusing. And in the parts that it's confusing are the reasons we have all sorts of denominations and different evangelical belief structures inside evangelicalism. And when we get there, I don't think Jesus is going to give a rip at all. A rip at all, whether we were Calvinists or Arminians, whether we were Democrats or Republicans or Libertarians. I don't think he's going to care if we love socialism or we love capitalism. I don't think he's going to care if you spoke in tongues or didn't speak in tongues. I don't think he's going to care. I told you this is a rant. But you know what I do think he's going to care about? He's going to look at us and he's going to say, all right, how well did you do what I told you to do? And in particular, I told you that I freed you to love God and to love others. So let's find out, how well did you do loving God and loving others, right? And in particular, how well did you love God by loving others? See, I highlight that because here's the thing I think we sometimes slip into. We think, well, the way I love God is I study lots of books about God. And the way I love God is I work through doctrine about God. And the way I love God is I understand theology regarding God. And the way I love God is I protect all of those systems by having groups and discussions and statements made online about all of this information and data and stuff. And that's how I love God, because I give God solid lip service of just how theologically structured he is. Now, again, I want to be clear. I am not taking away from the importance of the tools of theology, the tools of reading books about God and spirituality and obedience and ethics and all of that. Like, all of that is fantastic that we do that. But it is a means to an end. It is nothing more than the tools in the toolbox so we can get to work. And the get to work part is really critical, because that is what we are judged by. Not what we thought, not what our convictions were, but what we did based on those convictions. In fact, in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 10, it says this. It says, we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may receive what is due for what he has done, or she has done, in the body, whether good or evil. Good and evil are less about thoughts and more about actions. And what he wants to do when he slides the piece of paper across the table to give us the test is he's going to say, all right, I want you to write out all the people you loved and how you loved them. And every decision that you made was a decision made in light of the fact that you know chiefly your job is to shed the love of God through your life into the world around you, loving the lovely and the unlovely at every turn you come to. How well did you do that? Write down the names of everybody that you loved. Right? And that you did it in my name, so that I knew you loved me so much you were willing to love other people. In fact, to love them so much you put them before yourself, which is, weirdly enough, something the Bible says, right? It's that others' lives matter more than our own. Philippians chapter 2. And it says that because Jesus set his life to the side to love us even more than his own. See, I think this is really helpful and really powerful, because, again, when we get there and he cracks the book, he's going to be like, I set you free for a reason. And what was the reason, right? What did you do with this freedom? See, I love this because I don't know the tone, right? When he asks, Matt, what did you do? I don't know if he's going to be like, dude, what did you do? Right? Or if he's going to be like, tell me, what did you do? You know, and if I go, well, you know, I studied a lot of books. I read a lot of things. I checked out a lot of podcasts. I read a lot of blogs. I had a lot of discussions about predestination and election and lots of discussions about political issues and lots of discussions about whatever it is, you know. And he's like, right. Yeah, I watched all of that. That wasn't what most excited me. That was nice. You really understood, like, tools. You knew what a hammer does, what the claw part of a hammer does, the handle part of a hammer does, the head of the hammer does. You know how to put it in the hammer slot there on your tool bag. You knew where to put it in your garage. Like, I got all that. But did you build a house for somebody that needed it? Like honestly, it's like that's kind of part of the thing. If I go, well, I did a lot of stuff in my own garage with the hammer because I really it was just for me. You know, I really enjoyed kind of doing it. It kind of sparked my curiosity. I figured out different ways to flip my hammer, figured out different ways that I could kind of, you know, polish my hammer and look at my hammer and reconsider the hammer in a different way. And he's like, yeah, dude, but did you actually go like pound nails with a hammer? Like that's what he's going to want to know. And therefore, it comes back to he's asking the question, what did you do to show love toward me by loving those who have my image in them, right? Because you got to remember, in Matthew chapter 25, Jesus kind of tells this kind of future event where it's the true believers and the non-believers all before the throne of God, and it's the same judgment that we see in 2 Corinthians 5:10, right? And the measurement, again, is not what was your theological proclivity, what was your political position, what was your economic belief structure, none of those things. It's going to come back to, well, when I was in prison, did you visit me? When I was thirsty, did you give me water? When I was hungry, did you give me food? When I was naked, did you clothe me? His point is, it's not what you say. It's not the conviction that you state. It's not the intellectual structure that you hold. How did you love? Galatians chapter 5, verse 13. He says, for you were called to freedom, brothers. So Jesus sets us free indeed, right? But why does he set us free? Does he set us free so we can then pursue what we want? Does he set us free so we can kind of emotionally feel better about ourselves, that we can have this sense of spiritual enlightenment internally so we float above the clouds in our own kind of psyche? Is that why he sets us free? Is it about my walk with Christ and my enjoyment of faith and my security because Jesus has given himself for me? Is that what it's about? Well, frankly, no. All right. Those are dividends you get, but they are not the chief thing. The chief thing, he says, do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh. And what he says there is not just use your freedom to sin. He's not just saying that, but more importantly, he's saying don't use your freedom for yourself. Don't use your freedom that I have bought for you on yourself. Because the very model of the cross is what? Jesus gives himself away for our freedom so we can what? Give ourselves away for others' freedom. This is why in Matthew 25, he's like, what did you do for others? Not how were you a cul-de-sac to yourself and studied all the great historians and theologians of old and understood, again, all the complex theological and biblical ideas and knew how to parse a passage and do an inductive Bible study. Like, again, he doesn't care how well you know how to use the tools, except to the degree that you use them for the cause of love. Otherwise, it's just, again, like having a whole big toolbox where we just love to collect tools because they're so shiny and pretty and cool and interesting, and they can do so many different things. Do you ever go do stuff with them? No, I never use my tools. I just keep collecting them because I think they're so interesting, right? Like, that would be silly. But I think sometimes we like to collect a lot of ideas and positions and make a lot of statements, and then we do them from the safety of our keyboard or whatever else, right? Like just not getting our hands dirty too much to go and really love other people. But here in Galatians 5, again, he says, hey man, I have set you free, but don't use your freedom as an opportunity for yourself. He says, but through love, serve one another. He says, for the whole law could be wrapped up in the single statement, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. See, I think this is huge. I mean, it's absolutely huge. I think it's been kind of one of the underlying drivers now for a number of weeks in the podcast that I really honestly believe that one day when we're dead and gone and standing before Jesus, he will crack the book and he's just, again, going to be like, okay, let's talk about all the ways you loved or all the times you failed to love because you put yourself before other people. Like, that will be the real big test. And again, this has nothing to do with us getting into heaven. We're not taking the test to get entrance into the gate. No, we're walking through the gate. What we're really talking about is how many tickets you get to ride on the rides, right? That's what rewards are all about. It's like walking into a giant amusement park where you get a certain amount of tickets, and then once those tickets are spent on the rides, like, there is a reward system of heaven based on what we do here somehow pays a dividend there, and that is measured by our activity. And the activity is chiefly, did you show you love God so much, you trust God so much, you're so infatuated with him that you are willing to do the hard thing of putting others before yourself, serving others before you serve yourself, loving the unlovely, loving the lovable, all of that because you love God. And what God told us to do is, hey, big commandment 1, big commandment 2, dig me, dig them, love me, love them, serve me, serve them. And the way you serve them shows you are serving me. And if you don't serve them, don't love them, don't care for them, he's like, you are just giving me lip service, but I need to see it backed up with some activity. Because that's real love. Real love does. Real love doesn't just simply say. That's cheap. That's convenient, right? Love, it does. Now, for those watching, you can see, man, I'm breaking some sweat here. I'm breaking sweat, all right? For those listening, you're being spared, all right? But I'm breaking sweat. But I think this is so critical, I just can't state it enough. And that this is our real virtue. Our tools, again, are memorizing the Bible, studying the text, getting our own sense of identity in Christ figured out. But that's meant to be exported. All of that's meant to be exported and not simply exported by sitting around and having an interesting Bible study. If anything, what we should do with our Bible studies is what Hebrews 10 talks about. We're stirring one another up to love and good deeds. Notice that. Right? He says you literally want to agitate, stir one another up. You meet together to stir one another up to go do loving things and good deeds, right? So it always flows back to this. This is why Jesus is going to bust out the ledger, not the theology test, and say, did you do this? And did you do it well? And did you do it in such a way that was almost in the realm of uncomfortable as opposed to easy? And did you see all of that other stuff is just means to this chief end, or did all that other stuff become your chief end? Because there's this phenomenon I have been paying attention to more within my evangelical corner of the world. And it's this thing where it seems that the groups or the parties or the individuals or whatever, not every one of them, by the way, I want to be clear about that, but oftentimes the ones that I look at and I go, you have the highest view of orthodoxy and the highest view of theology and the highest view of intellectual rigor attached to the Christian life and apologetics and everything else. I can honestly say that I have to struggle at times to see like authentic love out of those groups in comparison to my other evangelical brothers and sisters that maybe apply less academic rigor, less theological focus. Maybe they're like, I'm not quite sure what I am. I just love Jesus and I love worship and I want to reach lost people. And they're like, I don't know what my label is. I guess I'm this, but I've never really studied it. It doesn't matter to me. I'm just passionate about X. And I see that those people seem to almost love people better, more and consistently than the ones that have this real lofty kind of theology matters, truth matters. And it's almost like, again, the conviction is no more. And then be like super intense or certain about that, almost to the point of being demeaning if you don't agree with them. But I don't go like, wow, those are the groups I run to when I want to understand how you love unlovely people. Like, that's the irony. Like, I go, man, their ideas are rich, they're thoughtful, they're sound as far as from a kind of a formal logic perspective. I would say I land in those camps on many of the ideas, but I almost never look at those camps on how to love people. That's the weird, bizarre irony that I'm looking at more. And I almost wonder if we are modern day Pharisees sometimes in this camp that I'm a part of, because we're better at thoughts than we are at real painful actions. And yet Jesus said, I freed you to love, and I will measure you one day on how well you loved. So are you loving? Because it's the doing of love, not just the saying of love. I mean, we will pry apart the theology of love. and how love plays into predestination and election. And does God love all or only love the elect? And we'll have these big giant discussions about theological merits. And in the end, I'm like, and so how did we go love people after all of that? Like, what was this big diatribe and research thing on love if we didn't go love people, right? So told you it was going to be a rant. So yeah, that is the key. And in that, when I said earlier, I don't think Jesus cares about what your positions are, I really don't. I just don't think he gives a rip, bluntly. I think on maybe some things, if they're really outside of obvious biblical orthodoxy, he's like, yeah, you got to work on that. But frankly, we're all going to die. We're going to get there. We're going to find out half our ideas were baked, you know? Like, honestly, like either the Calvinists are right or the Arminians are right, or somebody between those two are right. And some of us are wrong. And at some point, we're going to find out all the ways we were wrong or blind or silly or proud or whatever. Thank God for grace. Grace gets us in, keeps us in, holds us in, right? That's just going to be true. But again, how many tickets you get to go to the fair that is eternity? That's predicated on love. It's love, right? And so every decision we make in life, every position we take, every theological ideal that we hold still is bound by how that thing makes it possible for us to love others and therefore show our love to God by loving others. That's what it comes down to every single time. So some practical things in my world, I was writing down a number of things, but you know what? When you get there one day, here's how maybe he's going to care about your politics. He's going to want to know, okay, so you voted a certain way. And you voted that way because your heart was to love others how? Right? So you voted conservatively, for example, because your mission was to love others how? Not because liberals made you mad. That's not a thing. That anger, like they made you mad, it's not a love, that's mad, right? Different thing. Rather, you voted conservatively because you felt that vote best loved others. How? You voted Democrat or liberal because you thought that vote best loved others. How? The good news is both of those have ample reasons and ways you can love people in those votes. That's the beauty of it, right? Pick your own adventure on this. But the issue is, was it about preserving you? Was it about your frustrations? Was it about your anger? But if you go, hey, man, I vote conservative because I believe that's how I can love the unborn. Great answer. I vote liberal because I believe that's how I can love the poor. Great answer. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing, right? Because nothing's going to be airtight. But the thing that can be pretty tight is you do things to love people. You didn't wear a mask because this is how I loved people best, by not wearing a mask. I wore a mask because this is how I love people best. That's what this all comes down to. There's been a theme you'll notice in the podcast lately that says you can be a woke social justice warrior, or you can be a completely kind of like libertarian. Everybody's kind of on their own other side of the equation. None of this wokeness, none of this social justice stuff. Get the government out of everything. You can truly love Jesus and be either one of those. But the question is going to be, when you get there, like, how did that thing enable you to love people better? Because that's how you loved me, right? This is what I think the beauty of this is. It allows us all to have our convictions, provided our conviction is at the mercy of, I use my freedom for others. So it doesn't matter the topic, right? Why did you have the theology that you did? Afforded me the ability to love others well. And in doing so, I love you, God. That's why I did what I did. Now, I said earlier, I say again, I am not taking away from the fact that, you know what? There are some areas that are really, really sound, kind of absolute, right? That do matter in how we love God, as far as from a position, from an intellectual perspective, right? That we believe Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. We believe that we all have a sin problem. Jesus is the only solution to that problem. We believe God's word is given to us so we might know God better, be confronted by our sin, so that from that we can repent, trust his freedom, and in that freedom to do what he did, which is we lay ourselves down for others just as Jesus laid himself down for us, because God so loved us, he gave, and therefore we so love God, we give ourselves away to others and to him and his purpose and cause. And so it all just comes back again to loving God, loving neighbors, loving enemies. That is what he cares about. End of rant, right? But that's what matters. That's what matters. And I want to drive this home because I keep thinking more about, I think in my life, I've thought there is absolute truth, right? Absolute truth. And my mission is to know, or not know, maybe to kind of throw the horseshoe toward that post of truth and try to get as close as I can to the post, because the closer I am to the post, the closer I am to absolute truth. And that's where God's going to look and say, well done, good and faithful servant. You thought hard, you studied big, you analyzed the problem, and you came up with an intellectual solution, and I'm going to reward you for just how bright you were and how close to the truth you were. And so then it became this big thing about I need to understand soteriology, and I need to understand eschatology and hamartology, and I need to understand pneumatology and Christology, and I need to understand ethics and virtues and values, and I gotta understand how this all plays out in a complicated postmodern system, and right, like all of that there. And then he's looking at me like, dude, you're so overthinking this thing. I made it real simple when I said 613 rules. Let's just push this over to the side for a minute and land you on the simple idea of love your neighbor as yourself. That is how you love me, which is why Paul repeatedly makes that command of loving your neighbor the totality of the law. Notice that Paul does not make it love God and love your neighbor. Paul repeatedly uses the second half of the greatest commandment as his first commandment in his replies to almost everything on this topic. And I think the reason is because embedded into that is when you love your neighbor, you're loving God. Chief example of this. This is quick, simple theology, not even 101, not 99 or 97. This is like kindergarten theology right here. When you read the Gospel of John, the evidence that Jesus loves God is that Jesus dies for us. I'm going to say that again. The evidence in the Gospel of John that Jesus loves God is that Jesus dies for us. He gives himself for us. In other words, the way Jesus shows his love for God is not by repeatedly saying, I love God, I love my Father. Start looking that up. Look up how many times Jesus says, I love God, or I love my Father. Just go ahead. You can even pause it right now. Pause it right now. Go look that up. Right? But then if you start reading it through the grid of, oh, well, Jesus shows his love for the Father by loving us. Well, then suddenly that becomes really profound. Suddenly you realize that Jesus didn't have to say he loved the Father. He proved he loved the Father by loving us, by giving himself for us, by sacrificing for us, by putting our needs before his needs. That is how he loved the Father. So the whole big template and model of this whole idea is that is what we do as well. Now, I know I'm banging the drum at this point. I've said this 55 times probably in this podcast, right? And right now the temperature in my office is probably 103, and I'm really pumping down the sweat down the spine of my back right now, but I'm positive that's just the thing. If I'm going to get excited about anything, and if I'm going to sweat over anything, and if I'm going to be certain about anything, it is the fact that, yep, I love God by loving people. And if I don't love people, I don't love God. And if I can't give the answer to all these decisions I make in life, as far as saying, yeah, I made that decision because it best loves people, right? Whatever it is, right? I use my money in a certain way because it loves people. I vote a certain way because it loves people. I take positions on whatever the issues are of the day because I love people, right? Whatever it is. Like if it's just more about, I've got thoughts, I want to protect my way of life, I've got a heritage that I dig, I've got thoughts about other people and how they're stupid and I'm smart, and some people are just idiots and I don't care what happens to them. I just care about my side, my ways, my group, my whatever. We're going to get there and he's going to be like, dude, I made this so brutally easy, right? So brutally easy. In fact, that's what I love about my friends that say, I'm not really into like theology and doctrine. I'm not into all that heady stuff. It's not my personality type. I just want to love people. Way to go. Way to go. Like, if that's all you want to do, you're probably going to do really, really well. You know what I mean? No, I think knowing those other things and taking that time to investigate, hey, I think that really can help us love people more. I really do. But if we're just doing it to do it, if we're just studying it, study it, right? Like I'm thinking about a person right now that I know, massive studier, has no real obvious displays of love, but boy, smart. Like if I had a question, I could go to that person. They would have an answer for every single theological question. One of the least nice people I know, right? And I go, how tragic is that? Like, you're studying the God of love who loved us so much he sends his son, and we're studying the son who loves us so much he lays his life down for us, and then they both look at us and go, yeah, go do likewise. And we go, I got to break that down more, man. I need to know the Greek and Hebrew on that one. You know what I mean? So it's like, he's like, I can't make it easier than that, right? Because that's the mountain tips. The mountain tips are all the same, right? And so at this point, I'll stop the rant also because I think I need some water, right? But I think it's important for us to work these things through, to understand these things, pursue these things, and to, again, not minimize those things that we love. Like I said, like studying the Bible and getting together with other Christians and working these things through, provided we don't take the training to be the final exam and we don't take the tool to be the thing. And we're not just collecting tools in our intellectual, academic, theological, ethical work shed and not actually putting them to use, and then putting them to use in a way that really loves people authentically where they're at. It doesn't do any good to have platitudes and positions and convictions that are loveless or useless, right? These things need to become useful and loving and lovely to others, or rather we allow them to reject us, but we love them still, even in the rejection, because that is really what Jesus did, man. The whole episode of the cross that day is a beautiful, lovely, ugly thing of love shown to people who hate. And that in and of itself is powerful. And that is the power we want to exhibit, because when we do, and when we're in that space, we are really living like Jesus, and Jesus was the first and great everyday missionary.